Questions without notice. The member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Is it a moral failure to build an election surplus of starving the National Disability Insurance Scheme of money, leaving Australians with a disability without the services they need?
Yeah. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the member for her question. Our government is 100% committed to every single cent that the NDIS requires. Every single cent. It's fully funded under this government, 100% fully funded. What the member has put forward is a blatant and ugly untruth, and she should withdraw it, Mr Speaker. And I would ask the Minister for Social Services to address the untruth that she has spoken in this place.
Members on both sides will cease interjecting. The Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. The Shadow Minister has asked about funding for the NDIS. Let me tell you how much funding we are providing for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. In last year, $13.3 billion. This year,
Deputy Leader
in
of the Opposition and the member for
2019-20,
Barton.
it will be $17.9 billion. That's a $4.5 billion increase in the funding for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. The following year it will be $22.2 billion. The following year it will be $23.6 billion. This is funding at a record level for disability. This is funding at a record level for disability. And I'd make one other very important point, Mr Speaker. I'd make one other very important point. There is one side of this House that can be relied upon when it makes a commitment to be able to deliver it and to be able to fund it. There's one side of this House that knows if you make a commitment to the Australian people, you need to have the financial wherewithal to deliver it. And sadly, under the previous government, we saw PBS referrals, PBS decisions being held up for fiscal reasons, an absolute disgrace. You will not see that under this government because there's one other very important number in the budget that the Treasurer brought down last night, and that is a $7.1 billion surplus. And why is that surplus so important? Because the Australian people can be confident that we are managing the budget, that we have a strong budget and that we can pay for the commitments that we have made. And indeed, you can see the evidence of that in the way, for example, that there's an upward variation, Mr Speaker, across 4 years for public hospitals of $1.9 billion. We can do that because the budget is under control. The budget will be in surplus. Our commitments on the National Disability Insurance Scheme are fully funded. Australians with disability can rely upon us to meet the commitments that we've made.
The member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister outline to the House how the government's plan for a stronger economy will secure a better future for all Australians, delivering more jobs, lower taxes and guaranteed essential services?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Boothby for her question. And I thank all the members of the Liberal and Nationals parties for the great job that they have done over the last 6 years in this very important task of cleaning up the fiscal mess left behind by the Labor Party when we came to office in 2013. In the budget surplus handed down by the Treasurer last night, the first budget surplus handed down in 12 years, Mr Speaker. That
the member for
step
Batman
one,
is warned.
Getting the budget back into balance by getting expenditure under control, keeping taxes under control, ensuring we're growing the economy to bring the budget back into surplus. but now the job begins of paying off Labor's debt, Mr Speaker. That job was done by the Howard and Costello government. It will be done by my government, Mr Speaker, in the same way it was done by the Howard and Costello government, and that is maintaining a strong economy, keeping spending under control, keeping taxes under control, and ensuring that we continue to give the incentive to Australians to go out there, work hard, start businesses, make investments. Mr Speaker, the second plank of what the Treasurer announced last night was to continue to build a stronger economy. And you don't do that with higher taxes, and you do not do that with reckless carbon emissions targets, Mr Speaker. What you do is you lower taxes for Australians, and you do it for all Australians. Because under our government, Mr Speaker, there is a point in working hard in this country. There is a point in having a great business and working hard in that business and investing in your future. Under a Labor government, Mr Speaker, there'd be no point in working hard, because the harder you work, the more they punish you, Mr Speaker. Because what you see in the Labor's tax plan is they have to punish some to pretend they want to help others, and all they will do is put a dampener on the Australian economy and hold that economy back. That's why we're investing $100 billion in the infrastructure the Australian economy needs and Australians living all around the country need to get about safer, to get home sooner and safer, to get on site and get out of the traffic, Mr Speaker. That's what our plan on infrastructure is doing, and more than $500 million investing in the skills of all Australians, from those coming out of school to those changing jobs in their late 50s or even their 60s. That is the skills plan that we're investing in, with 80,000 additional apprentices funded by this government, Mr Speaker. All of this guarantees the essential services that Australians rely on. Over 60% increases already under this government since we were elected for public schools and hospitals, Mr Speaker, and a 27% increase in funding for Medicare, the highest Medicare bulk billing on record, delivered by the strong economy and the strong budget management of a great Liberal national government, Mr Speaker.
Just before I call the Leader of the Opposition, those regular interjections, the members for Bass, the member for Griffith, Brand and also the member for Herbert are warned. I might as well be reading old Hansard here, but I'll just say it all again. If they interject again, they'll be out, and I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. This morning, less than 24 hours after delivering the budget, the government caved into Labor pressure and backflipped on energy payments for thousands of vulnerable Australians, blowing an $80 million black hole in the budget. Prime Minister, doesn't this just confirm, after 6 years of cuts and chaos, this budget is nothing but a con that has already fallen apart?
The Minister for Agriculture will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, just a couple of corrections for the Leader of the Opposition. First of all, the payments that are being made in the bill that went through this House are not in the 1920 year. That's the budget year. What we're talking about is the 18-19 year, Mr Speaker. Now, I know these are
members on my left.
Are things that are a bit of a mystery to the Leader of the Opposition, but I can tell you why we're in a position to provide that one-off payment to Australians this year that was in the government's bill introduced to the House this morning. And that is, since the last budget was handed down, and I did that as Treasurer, the performance of the budget over the last 12 months means that we are $10 billion better off this year, than we were at the time of when we handed down the last budget. And we believe that when we're in that position where we have outperformed on our budget and where we've been able to deliver a better financial outcome, then we should take the opportunity to ensure that those who need it most are given the opportunity to ease their cost of living pressures. That was the initiative that this government brought in. That was the initiative we acted on. And I'm very pleased, Mr Speaker, that it was able to pass through the House of Representatives today, and I trust it will also pass through the Senate later today, Mr Speaker, to ensure that they get that relief. But I can tell you, if the Labor Party ever gets to occupy the Treasury benches, there won't be the opportunity to share the best performance of a budget, Mr Speaker, because what we know when Labor was in government is budget after budget after budget they would promise and fail to deliver. That's why the member for Lilly will soon be leaving this chamber, but right now we can certainly say that we are in his debt, Mr Speaker. We are absolutely in the member for Lilly's debt. And over the next 10 years, Mr Speaker, we will eliminate the Labor debt that was left to this government because we have put the budget back into surplus. And over the next decade, Mr Speaker, we will wipe out the debt that was created by the financial recklessness of the Labor Party. They cannot manage money, Mr Speaker. They cannot be trusted to manage money. And what we know because they can't manage money is when they can't find it in their own budget, they come after the budgets of retirees, of families, of small business people, Mr Speaker. That's who they come after, the budgets of farmers and pastoralists and graziers. They couldn't even bring themselves to vote for a drought fund, Mr Speaker.
Prime Minister will just
Such was their recklessness.
Prime Minister will just pause for a second. The member for Batman will leave under Standing Order 94A for an hour. The member for Paterson is warned, and the Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I note that the member for Batman is leaving the chamber. Remember, the member for Batman was the one that said paying tax is a privilege, Mr Speaker? That's what the member for Batman says. Well, I think Australians should be able to keep more of what they earn, Mr Speaker. I think they've had enough of the privilege of taxes, Mr Speaker, and certainly the privileges that the Labor Party would want to put on them with $200 billion worth of more tax privileges that they'd like to put on hard-working Australians. Mr Speaker, we'll keep taxes low.
The member for McEwen has been warned, except he probably didn't hear because he was constantly interjecting. The member for Goldstein has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline to the House how the government's strong economic plan has repaired the budget and allowed us to pay down Labor's debt? Is the Treasurer aware of any alternative approaches?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, last night I announced to the House that Australia is back on track and Australia is back in the black, Mr Speaker. And that is the result of hard but necessary decisions that this side of the House have made over the last 6 years. And this is good news for the people of Goldstein, because as a result of the measures announced last night, more than 24,000 small businesses in his electorate will be able to access an increased instant asset write-off, now at $30,000, and now applying to companies with a turnover of up to $50 million. And more than 73,000 people in the electorate of Goldstein will now get tax relief as a result of the measures we announced, Mr Speaker. Now, I remind the House that when we came to government, unemployment was higher and growth was lower than it is today. But as a result of the decisions we have taken, Australia's budgetary position is stronger. And we were able to announce last night a surplus of $7.1 billion for 2019-2020, and a surplus in the next year of $11 billion, Mr Speaker. And in the next year after that, $17.8 billion, Mr Speaker. And the year after that, $9.2 billion, Mr Speaker. $45 billion of surpluses over the next 4 years, Mr Speaker. A $55 billion turnaround from the budget mess left by the member for Lilly, Mr Speaker. That is the result of good economic management. And brought the tax...
The Treasurer will pause for a second. The member for Paterson will leave under Standing Order 94A. All interjections are unparliamentary. Probably a bad idea to look at me while you do it. The Treasurer has the call.
And we brought spending growth, Mr Speaker, down to less than half of what we inherited, under 2%, Mr Speaker. And tax to GDP has stayed at 23.3%, below our cap at 23.9. But we have a cap and those opposite don't, Mr Speaker, because they don't believe there should be any limits to the taxes, because they have $200 billion of taxes.
But, Mr Speaker, the reality is our strong budgetary position has allowed us to invest in the things that matter to the Australian people. $100 billion of infrastructure, which will get them to work earlier and get them home to the dinner table sooner, Mr Speaker. And a skills package of more than $500 million to create 80,000 new apprentices. And tax cuts for more than 13 million Australians, Mr Speaker, because we believe Australians should earn more and Australians should keep more of what they earn, Mr Speaker. That is the contrast at the next election. We on this side of the House are for lower taxes. Those on that side of the House are for higher taxes. Mr Speaker, this budget presents a clear choice to the people of Australia.
The member for McMahon.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Can the Treasurer confirm that last night, just hours after the budget was delivered, the Prime Minister, Treasurer and Finance Minister had crisis talks about changing the budget? Doesn't this just confirm that after 6 years of cuts and chaos, the budget is a con job which is falling apart before our eyes?
The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, what I can confirm to the House is last time we announced a budget surplus.
That's right.
A surplus that the Labor Party never dreamed of. Now, as I was locked away yesterday, Mr Speaker, I understand the Prime Minister told the House that the last time the Labor Party delivered a surplus, he had curly hair, Mr Speaker.
Curly long hair.
Curly long hair. Well, I can confirm to the House the last time the Labor Party delivered a surplus, I had a mullet, Mr Speaker. I had a mullet. I had a mullet. It's long gone now. It's long gone. Because God only created a few perfect heads and the rest he put hair on, Mr Speaker. But the reality is we have produced a budget surplus and we have provided assistance to those low-income earners, to those people on a disability support pension, to those people on an age pension, to those people on a carer's payment, to those veterans, Mr Speaker, to ease their cost of living pressures and to help them meet the next energy bill. You can only do that, Mr Speaker, with a strong economy that's growing from year to year, a strong economy that was stronger today than it was from what we inherited, Mr Speaker, a strong economy that has created more than 1 million new jobs ahead of schedule, Mr Speaker, a strong economy that has seen the number of people of working age on welfare the lowest in 30 years, Mr Speaker, a strong economy that sees a government with its spending growth the lowest of any government in 50 years, Mr Speaker, a strong economy that last night could announce a massive mental health package to treat youth suicide, Mr Speaker, and the least vulnerable people in our society, to help with early psychosis treatment, to help with 30 new headspace centres, to break those waiting lists, Mr Speaker, to get support to Indigenous communities with peer support that they need most, Mr Speaker. This will make a difference to people's lives. This will save lives. And together with the other measures, to put more drugs on the PBS, more money into aged care, to help with the Medicare benefit schedule, to extend it so that people with breast cancer can get their diagnostic imaging through the Medicare benefit schedule, Mr Speaker, these are the measures that are the social dividend from a strong economy, Mr Speaker. So we make no apologies for the fact that we have taken the necessary decisions. We make no apologies for the fact that we have taken the difficult decisions. We make no apologies for the fact that we are creating a budget that is in surplus, the first surplus in more than a decade, something that the Labor Party could only dream of.
The member for Wentworth.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Wentworth by-election sent a clear message that people in my electorate want urgent action on climate change and the environment. We have just experienced a summer of extreme weather events, 1 million dead fish in the Darling River, and credible experts say that on our current trajectory, Australia has no chance of reaching our Paris commitments. Last night's federal budget failed to take the opportunity to promote the role of renewable energy and show national leadership on the environment. Prime Minister, will you commit to strengthen our environment laws and put in place a well-resourced, independent national environment protection agency that would have equivalent powers to the national corporate regulator and the ability to impose a similar range of penalties?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for her question, and the government agrees that action needs to be taken to address climate change, and that's why in last night's budget there was a $3.5 billion climate solutions plan that was included in last night's budget. And several weeks ago, Mr Speaker, I outlined in some precise detail exactly how we were going to meet our 26% emissions reductions target through the various measures that we've outlined, and that includes the Emissions Reduction Fund, the Climate Solutions Fund, which provides the reverse auction, which purchases the abatement that is achieved within industry and business and others, and that program has been extremely effective over the last 5 years. It's one of the reasons why, when we came to government, we turned around a more than 700 million tonne deficit in reaching our 2020 targets in Kyoto, and we will now beat our Kyoto targets by 369 million tonnes, a 1.1 billion tonne turnaround through the success of our emissions reduction policies. Now, in addition to that, the Snowy 2.0 scheme, our Efficient Energies and Communities program, the connection of the Marinus Link to Tasmania, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Wentworth on a point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. The question was, will the government commit to—
No, the member for Wentworth needs to state the point of order.
Relevance.
Okay. The member for Wentworth may proceed.
My question was whether the government would strengthen our environment laws and put in place a well-resourced, independent national environment protection agency with appropriate powers.
I make the point to the member for Wentworth, as I've made on many occasions, and that is, whilst that was certainly asked, there was a lot of other material in the question as well, and the Prime Minister, or indeed a minister answering the question, is entitled to refer to that. So that is one of the perils of a 45-second question, I have to say. The Prime Minister has the call.
Speaker. So these are the mechanisms which will ensure that we do meet our 2030 emissions reduction targets, which we have set at 26%. But I'll tell you what we won't do, Mr Speaker. What we won't do is force businesses to spend $36 billion purchasing foreign carbon credits as a way of reducing emissions, Mr Speaker, and that is the policy of the Labor Party announced on Monday of this week. Mr Speaker, they want carbon credits from Kazakhstan, Mr Speaker. That is the policy of forcing businesses to shell out $36 billion that they could spend on increasing wages. They could spend it on creating jobs, in investing in their businesses, in dividend distributions to their shareholders. But no, the Labor Party wants $36 billion to go to foreign carbon traders, Mr Speaker. Now, over in Kazakhstan, I'm sure they're pretty pleased about this, Mr Speaker. I'm sure they're absolutely thrilled about this. Some may call this a carbon tax, Mr Speaker. I'm going to call it the Borat tax, Mr Speaker. The Borat tax, which will be put on by the Labor Party with carbon credits to Kazakhstan, and I know what Borat would think of the Labor Party's policies on emissions reduction, Mr Speaker. Very nice, very nice. That's what they'd be thinking about the carbon trading policies of the Leader of the Opposition, who wants to force companies to send $36 billion offshore, sucking jobs offshore, sucking profits offshore, sucking wage increases offshore. Mr Speaker, the only bonuses anyone is going to get from the Leader of the Opposition is the bonus that will be provided to foreign carbon traders who are just simply saying to the Leader of the Opposition, make my bonus.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. The member for Bonner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer update the House how the government's strong economic management is lowering taxes and allowing hard-working Australians to keep more of their own money? Is the Treasurer aware of any threats to this approach?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bonner for his question. And I know that he is working hard for the people of his electorate, and they're direct beneficiaries of the measures that we announced in last night's budget. For the people of Bonner, there are more than 17,000 small businesses that now will be able to access the $30,000 tax offset. The small and medium-sized businesses, Mr Speaker. There is, in the electorate of Bonner, more than 70,000 taxpayers who will now be able to get a tax cut as a result of the measures we have taken in this budget. And, Mr Speaker, the people of Bonner, like the people of Queensland, have benefited from the increased investment in schools and hospital funding that we have put in place since coming to government. Now, Mr Speaker, in last night's budget, it was the next stage of our economic plan. It set out how we can continue to see strong economic growth, we can continue to see low unemployment, and we can continue to skill up our people for the jobs of today and for tomorrow. And $100 billion infrastructure is a major contribution to the building the productive capacity of our economy, so that people can get to work sooner and that they can get home sooner as well to be at the kitchen table. But, Mr Speaker, we are doing all of this, investing in infrastructure, investing in skills, providing $158 billion of tax cuts, all without increasing taxes. Yeah. That is the difference, Mr Speaker, between us and the Labor Party. Now, the member for McMahon, he has the gall to tell the retirees of Australia that if they don't like their policy, then they can vote against the Labor Party.
Good plan.
Well, we also saw last night in the budget papers that dwelling investment is expected to fall in 2019-2020 by 7%. This is the worst possible time for Labor's housing taxes, Mr Speaker, because the Labor Party's housing taxes are designed to drive prices down and rents up.
That's it.
And independent economic modelling has shown that prices could fall by as much as 16% and rents could go up by as much as 22% as a result of Labor's policy. So, Mr Speaker, the contrast at the next election is very clear. We have a coalition that is delivering budget surpluses next year and into the forwards, and a coalition that is delivering infrastructure, skills and lower taxes, and a Labor Party that is committed to higher taxes on retirees, on homeowners, on small business people, on people who go to work. There's only one choice at the next election. Vote for the coalition because we are for lower taxes.
The member for McMahon.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Can the Treasurer confirm that page 159 of Budget Paper 2 shows that energy payments will cost $284 million? Can the Treasurer also confirm that this morning the government introduced a bill which states that it will cost $365 million, an $81 million blowout in 24 hours? Doesn't this prove that after 6 years of cuts and chaos under this Liberal government, the Treasurer's con job has fallen apart before the ink was even dry on the budget papers?
The Treasurer has the call.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Mr Speaker, it's like being hit with a wet lettuce, Mr Speaker. It's been like hit with a wet lettuce. Because at the end of the day, what we have done is provide energy support, energy assistance payments to people who need it most, Mr Speaker, and we have done that from a strong budget position, and we have acknowledged the cost of living pressures that people are under, Mr Speaker. But I can also tell the House that we have announced a budget surplus, Mr Speaker, and that when it comes to our previous forecasts, we have outperformed them, Mr Speaker. When it came to the 16-17 year, Mr Speaker, we outperformed the forecast in the final budget outcome by $4 billion. When it came to the 17-18 final budget outcome, we outperformed by $19.3 billion. But, Mr Speaker, when the member for Lilly was running around doing budgets, he actually underperformed his own forecast. Do you know by how much, Mr Speaker? $80 billion, Mr Speaker.
By that much.
Missed it by that much. Missed it by that much, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, the member for McMahon likes to forget recent history, but let me remind him that after we got elected, he went to the press club and he set some tests for the new coalition government.
He did.
And one of those tests was that we kept unemployment below 6.25%, Mr Speaker. Well, I can inform the member for McMahon that unemployment is 4.9%, Mr Speaker. Now, another test that the member for McMahon said is that we have a AAA credit rating, Mr Speaker. Well, I can inform the member for McMahon we have a AAA credit rating. And another test that he said a test that we would be in the top 10 countries of the world for economic performance. Well, I can tell the member for McMahon we're in the top 10 countries of the world. But now, Mr. Speaker, he also set another test. He did. And that other test that we set a tax to GDP ratio of 23.7%, Mr. Speaker. Well, we are, as according to the budget papers, at 23.3%, Mr. Speaker. But you know what? This is the hypocrisy of the Labor Party. Because when they were puffing their chest with their union mates at the National Conference last year, they said there's no need anymore for a tax to GDP ratio. Forget a speed limit on taxes. We will increase taxes, and that will have any impact on the economy, Mr. Speaker. So the member for McMahon has no credibility. None. He went to the press club. He said tests for us. We have met those tests, and these are tests that he even won't hold himself to account with.
The member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question is also to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer update the House how the government is guaranteeing the essential services that Australian families rely upon, including in my electorate of Robertson, and how might a different approach to managing our economy undermine this approach?
The Treasurer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Robertson for her question. And I can inform the House that as a result of the measures announced last night, there are more than 16,000 small businesses in the member for Robertson's electorate and medium-sized businesses that will benefit from the extension to the instant asset write-off to $30,000, Mr. Speaker, and to companies with a turnover of up to $50 million. Now, already we have seen that 350,000 small businesses.
Treasurer, keep going.
That already we have seen more than 350. Mr. Speaker, the Labor Party is not interested in small business. Not interested in small business. They actually want to increase the taxes on small business, Mr. Speaker. They're not interested in small business. They're not interested in the engine room of the economy. 3.3 million people in every corner of the local community. There is a small business. From the dry cleaner to the cafe, Mr. Speaker, to the person who runs the local shop, Mr. Speaker. They're the small businesses that we as Liberals and Nationals spoke to last night, Mr. Speaker. And they are the small businesses that the Labor Party ignores, Mr. Speaker. And in the member for Robertson's electorate, there are 16,000 of them that will benefit directly as a result of the measures. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are nearly 60,000 taxpayers in the member for Robertson's electorate who will directly benefit from the tax cuts that we announced last night, Mr. Speaker. And there are two instalments to those tax cuts. There is the extension of the instant low and middle income tax offset, Mr. Speaker, which will see somebody on $60,000 a year get $1,080 in their pocket in just 13 weeks' time when they put in the next tax return. And if you're a teacher and a tradie and you're a couple in a family, Mr. Speaker, and you're both earning $60,000 each, that's $2,160 in your pocket in 13 weeks' time due to the announcements of the Morrison government, Mr. Speaker. That's money that goes to your quarterly energy bill. That's money that goes to your monthly mortgage payment. That's money that goes to your yearly car insurance, Mr. Speaker. These are decisions taken by our government that will ease the cost of living for all Australians, Mr. Speaker. And because we have got a strong budget position, we were able to spend more record amounts on hospitals and schools, like building a children's cancer centre for the first time in Sydney, Mr. Speaker, like a brain and spinal ward in South Australia, Mr. Speaker, like extending the PBS to 6 new drugs, like one for acute leukaemia, Mr. Speaker, that would otherwise cost $130,000 for a course, but now it costs $6.50 for a concession holder and $40 for someone who's a general patient. Mr. Speaker, last night's budget was for the people of Australia. Last night's budget creates a stronger economy. Last night's budget guarantees essential services.
The member for Rankin.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. When did the Treasurer first decide that the energy payment numbers and decisions in the budget were wrong?
The Leader of the House will cease interjecting. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, as has been said many times, it was this government that has provided an energy supplement to the people to ease their cost of living pressures, and we have done that with a strong budgetary position, Mr Speaker. It wasn't something that the Leader of the Opposition had ever thought of, Mr Speaker. Out of touch, Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker. Somebody who's not interested in the cost of living pressures with his new electricity tax, Mr Speaker. Someone who's not interested in cost of living pressures by raiding the hard-earned savings of retirees, Mr Speaker. Someone who's not interested in cost of living pressures with his push to increase rents for millions of Australians, Mr Speaker.
The Treasurer will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Yes, Speaker, I refer to your earlier ruling today with respect to preambles broadening the relevance rule. This question contains absolutely no preamble and deals specifically with asking the Treasurer when it was that he first decided that the energy payment numbers and decisions in the budget were wrong.
I'll just rule on the point of order first, if the Treasurer's just resume his seat for a second. The Manager of Opposition Business is correct that this is a very short question. It's in fact one question without a preamble. Highly unusual, but if I can make that observation. But the Treasurer is entitled to obviously have in his introductory remarks, as I've said on many occasions, the opportunity to give some context. He's been going for about 35 seconds, 40 seconds. Well, there's 2:19 left on the clock and it's 3 minutes, so, you know, I mean, so I'd be expecting him to come to the specifics of the question or wind up his answer quickly. The Treasurer has the call. We
have extended this energy supplement to include this new cohort of recipients to ensure that this piece of legislation passes the House, Mr Speaker. That passes the House. And it's interesting to see the Leader of the Opposition, who never came up with this idea of supporting the low and middle income earners, the people on disability support pension and age pension. We made this decision because we wanted this legislation to pass the House.
The member for Kingston will cease interjecting. The member for Murray has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development. Will the Deputy Prime Minister update the House on how the government's record infrastructure investment is benefiting Australian communities, including those in my electorate of Murray? And how would another approach affect jobs, opportunities in the regions?
Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the member for Murray, who, like me and like everybody else, lives today in the age of infrastructure. The age of infrastructure is upon us. No matter where you live, no matter where you live, no matter where you work, we're investing to get you home sooner and safer. It's part of our $100 billion investment in infrastructure over the next 10 years. How fantastic is that? The Liberals and Nationals have committed $208 million to deliver the stage 1 of the Goulburn Valley Highway bypass of Shepparton. And I know how much that means, not only to the member for Murray, but certainly for the people he represents in the Great Goulburn Valley. It's a vital boost to road safety in that region. The bypass will mean that transport companies, of which there are many, can get product to market sooner, improving the competitiveness of local businesses, particularly those small businesses paying less tax with the instant asset write-off thanks to the budget, and helping them create even more jobs for locals. Stage 1 of the bypass involves a 10-kilometre road starting at the Midland Highway in Mooroopna. And this is something that the member for Murray has fought for, he's campaigned for, he's advocated for, and he has delivered. He has delivered as part of the Liberal Nationals government. Chair of the Goulburn Valley Highway Shepparton Bypass Action Group, Peter Johnson, welcomed the investment, and he said he told the member for Murray to have a financial commitment of this magnitude to the project is magnificent and the best news we could have hoped for. Now, the Mayor, Kim O'Keefe of Shepparton, she said the bypass will improve local business by helping our transport companies to move product as quickly as possible. And of course, she's correct too. We've already invested in the Echuca-Moama Bridge. It's currently under construction. Last month we announced a $15 million investment in the Fruitco project in Shepparton to lower production costs.
to help reduce waste and to get a better return at the farm gate. And I know how important that is for our farmers. It's jobs, it's opportunities, it's safer roads. Last night's was a budget for the bush, a budget for infrastructure, a surplus budget. Hallelujah! A surplus budget. This is what the Nationals, this is what the Liberals are doing, this is what we're delivering. We're investing in infrastructure, we're investing in country, coastal, remote, regional communities, and metropolitan too. And of course, if you look at Victoria, 79 more councils will receive money under the R2R, Roads to Recovery. That's significant. It's a significant investment in those local councils so they can make decisions about which streets and which roads can have better bitumen, more bitumen. In some cases, asphalt, they haven't had asphalt, they're going to get it, thanks to the Liberals and the Nationals. Faster rail to Geelong. I know how important that is for the member for Corangamite. Delivering the regional rail revival. $60 million to replace the Swan Hill Bridge. It just goes on and on. The age of infrastructure has dawned. It's upon us. Well done, Liberals. Well done, Nationals. Well done, Treasurer.
The member for Grayndler. Members on my right. Members on my right.
It's coming.
Member for Grayndler. I'm just trying to sort of contain myself at the irony of the Leader of the House complaining about the use of props, but I will enforce the rules. At this stage, I think I'm just going to give the member for Grayndler the benefit of the doubt that he needs a large photocopy, but we'll see how he goes.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. My question is addressed to the Prime Minister and arises out of the answer just given. Can the Prime Minister confirm that in the last few weeks his government did promise faster rail for Geelong, but last night's budget failed to provide a single cent over the next 4 years to deliver the project, and that his $200 million promise for Kakadu became Kakadon't, with not a single new cent in the budget? Doesn't this just confirm that his government's budget con job has already fallen apart?
Member for Grayndler's time has concluded, and the Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I thought the member for Grayndler had been around this place for a long time, and I thought he actually understood how budgets were put together. And now he's asked me about the funding for Kakadu. What he obviously has failed to see is that in the MyEFO, provision was taken in the decisions taken but not yet announced, and the funding was provided in that fund. And when the money is put in that bucket of money, Mr Speaker, when it was put in as a measure in the budget, then the line item funding is entered as dashes. That means the funding is in the budget. All of the funding is in the budget, and all the member for Grayndler has shown is, despite being here forever, he, like everyone on that side of the House, has no idea how a budget is put together. No wonder they haven't been able to find a surplus, Mr Speaker. They can't even find their way around the budget papers.
Members on both sides. Member for Grayndler. The member for Grayndler. The member for Grayndler.
Stop digging. Stop digging.
The member for Leichhardt has the call.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Health. Will the Minister update the House on how a stronger economy enables the government to invest in new life-saving treatments for patients living with cancer?
The Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Leichhardt, in particular for his advocacy for women to have access to new MRIs and PET scans for breast cancer, and also for his advocacy for a new MRI machine for CAMS. Like everyone in this House, he comes both as a member of Parliament and as somebody whose world has been rocked by the impact of cancer. I know that there are good people in every seat in this chamber to whom this is immensely important. At the moment, one of his closest friends, Trish Butler, is in the Cairns Hospital battling multiple myeloma. And so cancer touches all of us, and in this budget we've been fortunate to make some deep and profound and long-lasting investments that will help change the outcomes for patients. Only last week, with the Prime Minister, we had the privilege of visiting the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne, and we were able to invest $80 million in the creation of a national centre for cellular immunotherapy. This is one of the breakthrough treatments. Within cellular immunotherapy, CAR-T is at this point in time the most promising. There are Australians overseas, including Gina, from whose husband I had a text yesterday, that are currently receiving treatment. Right now, though, what we are doing through this investment is allowing Australians to have access to something which, for blood cancers such as leukemia and lymphoma, can be a breakthrough treatment, potentially a cure, here in Australia. We will help lead the world with this investment. But it's the same in Sydney, where we are establishing, with a $100 million investment in this budget, in conjunction with the New South Wales Government, Australia's first comprehensive cancer centre for children at the Sydney Children's Hospital. I was there only last Friday. I met a beautiful little girl, Olivia, who's 3 years old, and she's battling a very serious form of brain cancer, and that hospital is already providing extraordinary care and treatment to her and to her parents. Our hope is that she will win that battle. But this new comprehensive cancer centre will make it more likely that children such as Olivia and others will win that battle, and that their parents will have real hope. And that's what the new medicines that have been announced in this budget will do. Medicines such as Ibrance for 3,000 women with metastatic or advanced breast cancer, which would otherwise cost $55,000. Medicines such as Bavencio for Merkel cell carcinoma, a rare form of skin cancer which would have cost over $150,000, will now be available for $6.50 or $40.30 for non-concession patients. And medicines such as Besponsa, which the Treasurer announced last night, for advanced lymphoblastic leukemia. These are things you can only ever do when you have a strong economy, but these are the very reasons that we do the things we do.
The Minister's time has concluded. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has already performed one humiliating budget backflip on the energy payment, but his budget still gives more than 2 million workers a tax cut of less than $5 a week, while bankers and CEOs get $11,000 a year. So why won't he do another backflip today and give retail assistants, cleaners and manufacturing workers the tax cut that they deserve?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, on this side of the House we're very proud of the fact that in last night's budget 13.3 million taxpayers will be better off, Mr Speaker. And we believe on this side of the House in lower taxes. Mr Speaker, we believe on this side of the House that people should earn more and keep more of what they earn, Mr Speaker. We believe that we need a flatter, simpler tax system that remains progressive, Mr Speaker. Under the reforms that we announced last night, the top 5% of taxpayers will continue to pay about a third of the overall tax burden, Mr Speaker. And the top 1% of taxpayers will actually increase their proportion of the overall tax burden under the reforms that we have put in place. And that somebody earning $200,000 will be paying 10 times the amount of tax that someone who's earning $45,000, Mr Speaker. Now, here in Australia, the top marginal rate of tax cuts in at about 2.2 times average full-time earnings, Mr Speaker. In the United Kingdom, it cuts in at 4 times, Mr Speaker. In the United States, it cuts in at 8 times, Mr Speaker. We have a progressive system in this place, Mr Speaker, and in this country, and we're proud of it. But what we're also proud of is the fact that we return the people's money, because it's not our money, it's their money, Mr Speaker. And the Labor Party believes that you need to always chase higher spending with higher taxes, Mr Speaker.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
That doesn't end well, Mr Speaker. And when the budget papers show that dwelling investment will fall by 7% in 2019-2020, you know it's the worst possible time for Labor's new housing tax, Mr Speaker. You know that Labor's policy to drive rents up by 22% and drive house prices down by 16% comes at exactly the worst time. And the member for McMahon knows why. Because if you send dwelling investment down, if you send housing prices down, it will impact on household consumption. And household consumption is 60% of GDP. And we need household consumption to be strong. So the Labor Party, by sending people's prices down with their house and their rents up, will be hurting household consumption, Mr Speaker. Not to mention the retirees, Mr Speaker. Over 1 million retirees in Australia have saved diligently and done nothing wrong except do exactly that, take responsibility for their own savings and their own future. But the Labor Party's coming after their savings. And I say to the member for McMahon, why is it okay? Why is it okay for somebody who has their money in an industry super fund to still continue to get their franking credits, Mr Speaker, but someone who's a self-funded retiree is having them ripped away by the Labor Party? The hypocrisy in your policy. Mr Speaker, only the Coalition will lower people's taxes.
The Treasurer's time has concluded. The member for Petrie.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health in relation to mental health. Will the minister please outline to the House how a stronger economy enables the government to invest in the single largest package ever to support the mental health of young Australians?
The Minister for Health.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I also want to thank the member for Petrie for his question and his advocacy for strong action on mental health and, in particular, youth suicide prevention. Again, as every MP in this place knows, each of us has experienced mental health in our own lives and the challenges surrounding that, and in our roles as MPs. One of the first things that I did, and it was a very heavy weight on coming into this role, was to go with the great Professor Patrick McGorry to Grafton in the seat of Page, where there had been a tragic and agonising youth suicide cluster, and to meet with parents who had been affected by this most catastrophic of circumstances. We committed a headspace to Grafton, and the information that we have is, since that time, there's been a dramatic turnaround in health outcomes, and there are, to the best of my knowledge, no reported youth suicides in that town since. What that says to us is that real action on the ground can make a difference. It's a universal truth that's respected across all sides of this House. In this budget, we have committed $736 million to mental health, but in particular $461 million to mental health and youth suicide prevention. At the heart of it is $375 million for expanding the role, the space, the number of facilities that are associated and delivered through Headspace across Australia. An extra 30 new Headspace facilities. And these will be critical in helping to save lives and protect lives and to give young people hope. Expanded funding to ensure reduced waiting times in Headspaces. $110 million to ensure that there is funding and support for youth psychoses, action for those that are suffering from critical situations. $15 million for a national suicide prevention database to look for those trends such as were occurring in Grafton and to take early and immediate action. And then, of course, $15 million for direct intervention in Indigenous communities which have been going through a particular agony over and above everybody else in recent times. All of this is twinned with what we're doing in the broader community with mental health, a $275 million package on top of what we're doing with youth. For the first time, a network of adult mental health centres dedicated to the needs of adults, not just youth, and for the first time a network of eating disorder clinics for allowing residential treatment. Many people have fought for these things. It could never have been possible without a strong economy, without the ability to deliver these services. But as I said before, we do this because we have a strong economy, but it is why we need a strong economy, and this is why we do what we do.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Just before I ask my question, I'd like to associate the opposition with the remarks about the importance of mental health. There's plenty we disagree on, but not the importance of tackling mental health. My question is to the Prime Minister. With an election due any day, and national unity on the rejection of racist hate speech never being more important than it is now, will the Prime Minister now direct every member of his government to put one nation last?
Just before I call I'm going to need to rule that question out of order, because practice makes it very clear that the Prime Minister can only be asked questions for matters for which he's responsible, and that is not a responsibility of the Prime Minister. I'm prepared to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business on the subject.
Mr Speaker, just two quick points that I'd submit on that. The first is, as I've put previously, during the Howard government years the question was frequently asked. And secondly,
I don't agree with all precedents.
Respect that. And secondly, it has been the case where questions that were otherwise viewed by the Speaker as not within standing orders, when the Prime Minister has wanted to answer them, it's been allowed to proceed.
Yes, well, look, I mean, the subject matter of the question is not a responsibility of the Prime Minister, and I'm afraid it's black and white. So, and there are other occasions where Prime Ministers— the member for Petrie, the member for Latrobe, it's okay, we'll get to you. Where indeed there might be occasions where Prime Minister or ministers have wanted to answer questions that are out of order, but I could give you many examples where, even though that was the case, I didn't allow it, because I think we've got the standing orders and we've got the rules. So I'm going to stick with my ruling. I'll call the member for Latrobe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Cities, Urban Infrastructure and Population. Will the Minister update the House how the government's investment in fast rail will bust congestion and support population growth? How might a different approach derail important infrastructure projects?
Like what he did there? The Minister for Infrastructure.
Well,
Minister has to call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Latrobe for his question on the budget, and Labor has stopped asking questions on the budget. We point out after 7 questions, stopped asking no more questions on the budget. But on the budget, I can report that last night we put $4 billion into the Urban Congestion Fund, and over the last month alone we've been busting congestion right across the great cities of our nation, including in the member for Latrobe's electorate, in Racecourse Road, in McGregor Road, on the key intersections along the Princess Highway, and last night as well, duplicating Wellington Road in his electorate as well. It's such a congested piece of road. That will be fixed, as well as other areas. Now, this Urban Congestion Fund, Mr Speaker, is just one element of our population plan, which is aimed at easing the congestion on our big cities and supporting the growth of some of the regional areas. But another part of that plan is our 20-year fast rail plan. And in that plan, our aim is to connect our big capital cities to the satellite regional
Members
centres.
on my left.
And over the next 20 years, we hope that many will become like that, because it will enable people to reside in those regional centres and very easily commute into the big capital cities on a regular basis. We are starting with the first one, and we've got $2 billion on the table to get the Geelong—
Minister will resume his seat. I'm worried about this one, but the member for Grayndler on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker. It's on relevance, and it goes to when this very slow fast rail will actually commence.
The member for Grayndler will resume his seat. The member for Grayndler will resume his seat. It's no point of order. The minister has the call.
We announced $2 billion to get the Geelong to Melbourne fast rail done, and construction can begin in 2 years' time. $2 billion to get that road done, and the member for Kerryn Phelps has been one of the greatest advocates of this particular fast rail, and it will mean no longer a 60-minute journey but a 32-minute journey for the residents of Geelong. But I am asked about alternatives, and it's interesting when you look at the Labor Party where they are on fast rail from Geelong to Melbourne. And Mr Speaker, when the Prime Minister and I were announcing this, the Leader of the Opposition had his union thugs out there campaigning against us.
The Minister will withdraw.
I'll withdraw that, Mr Speaker. When the Leader of the Opposition himself was asked directly, does he support the Geelong to Melbourne fast rail? Mr Speaker, he's asked 3 or 4 times this question, and guess what he said? He actually said, well, we want to make sure the rail line from Geelong to Surf Coast is better. Mr Speaker, the Geelong to the Surf Coast is not Geelong to Melbourne. The member for Grainler has said nothing. The member for Grainler, the shadow spokesperson, has said
Members
nothing
on my
about
left.
fast rail between now and then until today. But guess what we read? Guess what we read the next day? Apparently the shadow treasurer is going to fund it. $2 billion matching it. No money to match. Jump on the ScoMo Express, Labor.
Members on both sides. The member for McEwen has been warned he will leave under 94A. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Environment Minister. Can the Minister confirm that the government first gifted almost $500 million to a small private foundation in a closed-door meeting and has now gifted $25 million of environment funds to an institute co-founded by multinational oil giant Chevron, which funds Chevron's work in the Minister's own electorate?
The Minister for the Environment has the call. Members on my right, the Deputy Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister will cease interjecting, as will the member for Barton. The Minister has the call.
And thank you for the question. I will have to take the question on notice with respect to Shell. I think it's fair enough. I don't have the information on that. What I do know is that we are...
Member for Grainler.
A serial offender.
So, if I can take that on notice, thank you. What I do know is that we have got a strong budget. We have got a strong record on the environment, and we're very proud of our announcements last night.
I just say to the Minister, she's entitled to take a question on notice. The standing orders of the practice make it clear. If she's going to do that, that's what she should do, and we'll move to the next question.
Okay, thank you.
The member for Forest.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Jobs, Industrial Relations and Women.
The member for Forest, pause for a second. The level of interjection is preventing me here. The member for Forest. If you could just start the question again. I call the member for Forest.
My question is to the Minister for Jobs, Industrial Relations and Women. Will the Minister update the House how the government's strong economic plan and investment in skills development is assisting more Australians, including more women, into the workforce? Are there any risks posed by pursuing a different approach?
The Minister for Jobs.
I thank the member for Forest for her question, and she, like every member on this side of the chamber, has worked hard to get the budget back on track and, as the Treasurer has said, back in the black for the first time in 12 years. The last time that Labor was able to deliver a surplus was 30 long years ago. And of course, our economic plan is working. Unemployment is at a decade low at 4.9%. Under those opposite, of course, unemployment leapt up to 5.7% when they were in government. The economy under us continues to grow, and there are more Australians in work than ever before. Under our government, we have seen the creation of 1.2 million new jobs, the majority of which are full-time jobs, and there are a record number of women in employment, and we have seen the gender pay gap fall now to a record low, whereas under those opposite it went up to 17.2%. Of course, we know that we have to continue on with the hard work in our economic plan, and the Treasurer announced that last night. We've committed to a further 1.25 million new jobs over the next 5 years, adding to the more than 1.2 million jobs already created under our economic stewardship. And as announced in the budget last night, the Coalition is committing $525 million to deliver a world-class vocational education and training system. This includes investment of more than $156 million to create up to 80,000 additional new apprentices, which will give priority to those in the skill shortage areas through our new apprentice initiative, and more than $50 million to provide greater job opportunities for young people in the regions. The government is delivering the skills today for tomorrow, and we're doing that through our package. We're ensuring that all Australians have the right mix of skills to succeed now and into the future, and that we are meeting employer needs. And, Mr Speaker, we are doing this without delivering new taxes. Those opposite have a plan to deliver $200 billion of new or increased taxes. Taxes on your retirement, on superannuation, on housing, on savings, and the list goes on. The only way that they can announce any initiatives is to reach deeper and deeper into your pocket. They reach deeper and deeper into your pocket because they don't believe in aspiration. We do, and we're lowering taxes.
The minister's time has concluded. The member for Port Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Environment Minister. Can the minister confirm that only a few weeks ago the government promised $2 billion for the Emissions Reduction Fund over 10 years, but that last night's budget stretched the same amount of money over 15 years and included only $189 million over the forward estimates? Doesn't this just confirm that this government's budget con job has already fallen apart?
The Deputy Prime Minister will cease interjecting. The Minister for the Environment has the call. Deputy Prime Minister. Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you for the question. Well, it's a good opportunity to refer to our $3.5 billion Climate Solutions Fund. Only with a strong economy can you devote that amount of money to the environment. $2 billion to the Emissions Reduction Fund, a fund that we committed to back in 2014, I believe, when Minister Hunt was the previous minister, and a total of 2.4. We've now committed another $2 billion. Further money in there relates to Snowy Hydro, Tas Hydro, and also the Marinus Link. But to the question more specifically, as we have said in the Climate Solutions package, the fund will deliver an additional 103 million tonnes of abatement to 2030. That was very clear. The auctions to deliver this abatement will be conducted over this 10-year period. Of course, and I'm sure the member will understand this, there is scope to contract additional abatement from 2031 and 2035.
The minister will just take
funding.
a seat. The member for Port Adelaide on a point of order.
On direct relevance, Mr Speaker, the question was about spreading the money over 15 years, and the minister is now talking about abatement over 10. So,
no, I just say to the member for Port Adelaide. No, members on my right
are assisting. The contradiction between the announcement and the budget.
And if the member perhaps refers to the last line of his question, I think he might find that it opened things up, and the minister is completely in order. If that was all he'd asked, we might be able to have a discussion. But when you have a tagline at the end of the question like you did, you just open the garage door. The minister is completely in order.
If I might just finish off, the allocation of the $2 billion Climate Solution Fund over the forward estimates also accounts for the $226 million that was still available under the existing $2.55 billion emissions reduction fund, which was announced in 2014.
The member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, my community at recent NDIS forums in Wangaratta, Wodonga and Benalla raised concerns of ongoing delays in access to services and equipment and about the process for signing off on draft plans. And last night the budget revealed a significant underspend in NDIS funding. This is disappointing when there is such need, particularly in rural and regional Australia. Prime Minister, can you please take immediate action to fast-track assessments and address delays in receiving equipment and services, and provide NDIS clients with the opportunity to sign off on a draft plan and avoid a lengthy review process?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Indi for her questions and relaying to us here in this House the concerns of those in Wangaratta and Wodonga and Benalla. And it's important that we are very aware of those concerns, as I know members on this side of the House are often raising the challenges that are involved in rolling out what is one of the biggest programs in social policy that we have seen in this country for many, many years, a policy that was initiated by Labor and supported by the then opposition, by the Liberal and National parties, and we are now implementing. It is an enormous task. You mentioned the budget allocation this year. I can say that there are now 250,000 Australians with a disability that are benefiting from the NDIS, and around 78,000 of those people are receiving support for the very, very first time. Now, the estimates that have been provided to the budget process in the past, and that was in my EFO, were based on the estimates of demand that has worked up together with state governments and with the Commonwealth, and that demand was not expected to be met in the current budget, and that would see the underspend that you've referred to. Now, it is not uncommon that when you have programs, as the previous government understood when it came to carers payments, member for Lilley will understand this, that demand-driven programs where the demand is not met in those years, you have an estimates variation to do with the underspend. And that is around about $1.6 billion for that year, but there is a corresponding higher commitment that we have to make of about $1.9 billion that shows up for providing support in other parts of the budget, which shows that there are effectively where one part of underspend is there, another part of overspend comes as a result of dealing with the issues that have been presented. Now, this might come as news to those opposite who don't know how to prepare a budget and certainly don't know how to deliver a budget surplus, Mr Speaker. But to go to your point, the member for Indi, these issues of addressing the specific plans of individual NDIS participants, we will continue to work to improve the access and planning pathways to make each step clearer for everyone. In September of last year I should say, the new NDIS participant pathway service improvements began being progressively implemented across Australia. NDIS participants will have face-to-face planning meetings that deliver easy-to-understand, accessible plans supported by a consistent single point of contact. The government and the NDIA are, though, under no illusions. Delivering this groundbreaking reform will inevitably involve some very significant challenges. The important thing to do is that we all maintain our support for this very important program. Our government is fully funding the NDIS, fully funding. The per-participant estimates in the budget are exactly as they were before, no change. Every single case that is evaluated and assessed and granted will get the support they need under the NDIS, and I would be very much pleased if this House could maintain its bipartisan—
The member for Tangney.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the minister update the House on how a stronger economy supports our law enforcement agencies to keep Australians safe? How might different approaches to our national security undermine this support?
The Minister for Home Affairs has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. Like all of us, we want to see our policing agencies properly resourced so that they can fight, for example, the scourge of ice and the misuse of methamphetamine across particularly many rural communities, but right across the country. There will be people in the gallery today and people who are watching this broadcast, Mr Speaker, who have seen the lives of some members of their family destroyed because of the use of illicit drug. People will understand that communities are ripped apart when people's lives are destroyed by drug use. And that's why, in this budget, Mr Speaker, the government has put $615 million of further funding into the AFP. It is the largest single funding measure for the AFP's domestic policing capabilities in over a decade. And, Mr Speaker, it goes directly, along with other funding that we've provided to Home Affairs agencies, to help fight the scourge of ice and other drugs. And it can only happen, Mr Speaker, if you manage the economy well. So the trouble is, when Labor was in power, in fact right back to 1989, Labor has never delivered a budget where there's a profit. They have delivered a loss in every budget that they presided over. It got so bad, Mr Speaker, that it got to the point where Labor ran out of money in government. They stopped listing drugs on the PBS, and what else did they do, Mr Speaker? They cut money from the AFP in the years 2010, 2011 and 2013, 2014. They cut $128 million from the AFP. When the Labor Party was in government last time and they ran out of money, they cut $30 million and 88 staff from the ACC. They cut $27 million and 56 staff from AUSTRAC. And listen to this, Mr Speaker, when they lost control of our borders, spent $16 billion and completely ran out of money, they cut $735 million and 700 staff from customs. What happened? Drugs flow across our borders. Gun parts come across the borders. They lose control of people movements across our borders as well. So, Mr Speaker, there are real and tangible benefits in making sure that you deliver a strong budget. It's not about delivering a profit for the sake of it, Mr Speaker. We are putting record amounts into education, into health, giving money back to people when they work hard, and we're providing support to national security agencies because it's necessary, Mr Speaker. And Labor always run out of money when they're in government. They will always spend, they'll always tax. But the fact is, as was demonstrated when they were last in government, they took money away from the federal police. So to the people in the galleries and people who are living in the suburbs and towns around the country who want to see the police do more in the fight against ICE, don't vote for the Labor Party because they take money away from our national security agency.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.